The Paul Leslie Interviews.
The man we're speaking with is singer-songwriter and recording artist Lennie Gallant. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well. So tell us where you are right now.
Right now, I'm in my apartment in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, overlooking the Halifax Harbour. I'm looking over the city of Halifax. It's a beautiful sunny day. And I'm watching a couple of sailboats sail by and a couple of large ships transporting all kinds of goods for all over the world.
You just painted a very tranquil picture.
Yeah, it's a nice spot. I like it here. I spend my winters in Nova Scotia and my summers in Prince Edward Island these days.
Okay. Well, for someone out there, because you're from Prince Edward Island.
I am from Prince Edward Island. The Gallant family is the oldest name on Prince Edward Island with any European heritage. And so my family's got pretty deep roots there.
For someone like me, for example, who has never been to Prince Edward Island, what is it like?
What is it like? Yeah, it's beautiful. It's interesting in that it's quite different from the other islands on the East Coast. Newfoundland has a very hard-edged, rocky, kind of sometimes barren and mysterious kind of topography. And then Cape Breton is a little bit like that, but deep hills and valleys. And Prince Edward Island is kind of a little more stretched out. It's got a lot of farms. Most of the land is cleared in the island, and it's got beautiful beaches, some incredible beaches, big sand dune beaches, and a lot of red cliffs, a lot of greenery. People come to the island and they fall in love with it very quickly. Of course, many people know it because it's the home of the story of Anne of Green Gables, which became quite world famous. And the Anne of Green Gables story is set only about a few miles from where I grew up, actually, but our experience was quite different than the Anne of Green Gables story.
And what is your heritage? Tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, in terms of your family.
My heritage is Acadian. Now, in your part of the world, people don't know so much about the Acadians, but they do know about the Cajuns. And if you know about the Cajuns of Louisiana, the Cajuns actually originated in my part of the world, in Acadia. There was, back in the early 1700s, late 1600s, early 1700s, there were wars between England and France. And so territory was being won and by one country and then the other. But the Acadians were the first people to settle in Canada on the East Coast. And they settled around Nova Scotia mostly to begin with, but then New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island. And it was known as Acadia. And the Acadians were there for, I think 150 or almost 200 years before, but 150 years, I think, before the wars that took place between France and England. England ended up getting possession of Acadia, and at that time wanted the Acadians who were living there to sign oath of allegiance that they would possibly have to go to war against the French. The Acadians wanted to be neutral. The England didn't like that, so they put them all on ships, gathered them all up under false pretenses, and broke up families, put them on ships, sent them to all parts of the world. Many of those people didn't make it. They died on voyages or destitute on streets, but quite a few of them ended up down in Louisiana and ended up becoming what we know today as the Cajuns. If you say the word Acadian in Acadian French, you would say Moi je suis Acadien. Me, I'm an Acadian. Moi je suis Acadien. So you can see where the word Cajun comes from.
Very interesting. So your parents, were they people who encouraged artistic expression?
They did. They were very, very supportive, I think. My mom was a little bit of a writer. She would write little skits and little comedy pieces, plays for local performances that they would put on. My mom and dad and their friends would get together, and they'd form a little troupe of performance to go around and play various community halls to raise money for various causes. If someone had a sick kid or a fire had burned down their house or whatnot, And they had a lot of fun doing that. They would put on shows, and as soon as I learned 3 chords on the guitar, I was enlisted to to join their shows. That's kind of how I started playing music in public, I think.
We're talking with Lennie Gallant. Has the reason that you create music changed through the years?
I don't know. It's interesting. I was about 13, I think, when I got my first guitar. And I do remember immediately trying to write something. Before I even learned a song of anyone else, I was kind of driven to create something on the guitar. And I've always felt that way. It's a way of being able to express myself, I guess. And I try to remain open to the world around me, soak up whatever's happening, whether it's an event in my own life or someone that I know or something on the news, something I've read, watched, paintings, pieces of theater, whatever moves me. If there are times that a song will grow out of it. And I think it's always kind of been like that. So I don't know if it's changed that much. I mean, different things change around it, but the reason I write is I think that's what I was put here to do, write songs. So I suppose that's more or less remained the same.
Before we go any further, I just want to be sure, and forgive me if I've been saying it wrong. Is it Gallant or Gallant?
Around here, people say Gallant.
Gallant, okay.
But if you said it in French, Acadian French, it would be Gallant. And it gets various pronunciations, and it's not a big deal. We're quite used to it. Some people will say Gallant.
Okay. Well, forgive me.
No problem.
There have been some great songwriters from Canada. Gordon Lightfoot, Leonard Cohen, Bruce Cockburn, Joni Mitchell. Do you feel a kinship with the writers who are Canadian in specific?
I do feel somewhat of a kinship in that I find that Canadian writers tend to be fairly eclectic in what they write about. Most of them have some kind of base in the more singer-songwriter roots, acoustic folk world, but they're not afraid to take chances with their music. Whether if you look at Neil Young, for instance, he'll put on an album that's very folky, but then his next album might be blues, the next one might be hard punk rock almost. Joni Mitchell was fairly experimental. She would write in a sort of folk genre, but also pop and sometimes even into jazz. Leonard Cohen, similar kind of thing. I think that perhaps it has something to do with wide open spaces, but also I think Canadians in general were kind of married to the radio stations like CBC, where you would get all kinds of influences from various backgrounds, and that maybe shaped their creativity, wanting to explore and experiment with different sounds, different styles a little bit. Yet still, no matter what album you listen to of Neil Young or Joni Mitchell or Leonard Cohen, it's still their voice, even though they may experiment and fool around with different styles. And so I think a little bit of that trickled down to what I do in that, I write songs that are very folk based, but some of them, I have traveled with a rock band, and we've done some stuff that is, full on almost rock and roll, and we've done other stuff that's a little bit country, some a little bit Celtic and Acadian, and so there's a bit of a melange going on, I think, but it does seem to hang together. And people tell me that they recognize my work as soon as they hear the first few bars, no matter what style it's in.
Not just of the Canadian singer-songwriters, just any artists that you've met through your journey as a singer-songwriter. Who have you been the most thrilled to meet?
Who have I been the most thrilled to meet? I think the greatest. I was doing a festival out in Edmonton, and we did a main stage show at the Edmonton Folk Festival. And after the show, this guy came up to me and he started talking about how much he enjoyed the work, and he was talking about the songs and so forth. And I was packing up my gear, and then I looked up and And I said, "Are you Ry Cooder?" And it turned out it was Ry Cooder who was there, and it meant the world to me that a man whose work I've admired all my life, and who's put out some of my most favorite albums, from the Buena Vista Social Club to his own work, and John Hyatt, working with John Hyatt and all these people, that he came over and talked to me, appreciated my work. That meant a lot. It also was great. Jimmy Buffett recorded one of my songs, and I got to perform with him on stage in Toronto. We sang it together. That was pretty cool too.
And that song you're talking about that Buffett recorded is Mademoiselle Voulez-Vous Danser?
Correct.
What
Good
inspired?
Pronunciation. You did pretty good there, Paul.
Thank you. What inspired that song?
I was in Paris, actually. I was I was performing in Paris with a group of Acadians who went over there to perform at an event, and we were in the Latin Quarter. We had a cool little hotel room overlooking the street, and I think we found out later that we were very close to a French model school, and all these beautiful women were walking by the street, and someone in the room said something, "Well, Mademoiselle, we'd all say," and there's kind of a French traditional tune that is very similar to that, and I don't know, I just picked up a guitar and I started playing the melody to the song, and it grew out of that.
I think the lyric that resonates with me, probably other people, is "We all have so little time."
Yes, it's true. We seem to forget that we're not here for very long. We need to keep reminding ourselves. I try to keep reminding ourselves that we're not here for very little time. We're not here for a very long time. And it's important not to let the small stuff get to you. We worry about so much, or so many people get so worried about things in their life, when, if you have your health, if you have friends and love surrounding you, then I think really, you're doing pretty good.
The other lyric that I wanted you to explain a little, if you could, is tell us about "These doors and windows open wide."
Well, I think the one of my albums is called "The Open Window," and I think it was just kind of I remember when I was a kid growing up in Rustico, a small community in the North Shore of PEI. Before I was old enough to get into the community dances, I'd hang around outside the local community hall and listen to the music coming out through the window. And I don't know why that image always stuck with me. I think it's just a sense of being open to the world. As a writer, you try to be open. You want to let inspiration come in, and I think it is something that I try to do in life, to try to be open to new experiences, open to other opinions, other ways of looking at things. I think that's important. Too many of us close these days. We want to shut down the other point of view, and that's a problem. That creates polarization, that it creates some of the things we see going on now in terms of the way people are relating to each other. The world seems to be getting a little more tribal right now in many ways, and that's a little bit worrisome. We need more openness. We need more tolerance and acceptance of other people's ideas, I think.
There's another lyric from one of your other songs. You said that open window resonated with you in the title of that album. Great album, by the way. But you say, "Waltz to the music from the open window." So that moment really, really stuck out to you.
Yeah, I guess it did. We used to have, if there was a wedding in the community, sometimes the kids would go and hang around outside, and you'd hear the music coming through the window. Yeah, I guess it did. Never really thought about it, but I suppose it did.
There's another song that you wrote I wanted to ask you about. It's just really, really great, lyrically, musically. Peter's Dream. Tell us about that.
As you may be aware, our oceans are in crisis. When I wrote Peter's Dream, it was right at the time, all of a sudden, the scientists and the people who were studying the oceans, especially on eastern Canada, had realized that the cod fishery was decimated. It had been decimated by factory freezer trawlers and by overfishing and foreign ships coming in as well, and just cleaning the place out, dragging the bottom, and not leaving anything behind. And the whole fishery, a very successful inshore fishery that had sustained so many small communities, kept people alive, and in harmony with the ocean, and the environment around us was totally destroyed by this overfishing. And they had basically shut the fishery down, so many communities collapsed. So many, especially over in Newfoundland and coastal communities. And I grew up in a small fishing village on the North Shore of Prince Edward Island. And so one night I was hanging out with three of my good friends, and we were discussing what was happening with the fishery, getting a little bit angry and certainly very passionate about it. And my friends left, late in the night, and I get up the next morning and I could hear a couple of fishing boats that were still operating, heading out of the harbor. I was very close to the harbor, the little cabin I was in. And I sat up in the morning, and it's amazing. Like, that song was written extremely quickly. I think I wrote it within an hour. I wrote down all the words, never changed a thing. It's since become quite a popular song on the Eastern Canada. A lot of people have recorded it. Some people over in the UK have recorded it as well. It seemed to have touched people. It had a certain resonance to it, I guess, and expressed what a lot of people were feeling, the passion and the anger and the frustration of not taking better care of the world around us, and for many people, a means of survival, a way of being in harmony with the world around us.
And what was it like to see that song transform into a book?
That was pretty cool. My sister Karen is a fabulous artist, and she is quite well known on Prince Edward Island. Her work sells very quickly. She hardly ever does shows because people they show up at her door wanting to buy her paintings. But her and I had for many years dreamed of doing something together. And a few years back, I thought about putting a show together that would be based on all of the songs I either wrote about or touched on Prince Edward Island in some way, because, as I mentioned, my family has such a long, rich history there. And Karen seems to have mined the same material in many ways. So I dreamed up this show called Searching for Abogweit, Abogweit being the original indigenous Mi'kmaq name for Prince Edward Island. It means cradled on the waves or something of that nature. And it is a show that celebrates Prince Edward Island through songs and stories that are written over the many years, and showcases a couple of hundred of her paintings. Her paintings are projected onto a huge screen and behind my band on stage, and they're constantly in motion in the Ed Burns style, where you get into a part of the painting and you move throughout the painting. So it almost looks like it's animated. I had hoped we'd do one summer of the show on Prince Edward Island, which would allow me to spend more time on the island in the summertime. But the show took off, and it's been amazingly successful. We've done over 120 sold-out shows now, and we're going to be doing another 8 this summer. So, as a sort of kind of a companion piece to the show, I put out a book with 52 of my sister's paintings and 52 of my songs together, and I chose the song "Peter's Dream" as the title song, the title for the book, both because it's a popular song, but also because my sister did an amazing painting for it. And you can see her work if you're interested. Either go to lenniegallant.com and click on her link, or you can also go straight to karengallant.com and see her paintings.
What is the biggest compliment somebody could give you?
People who tell me that my songs meant something to them because of something that happened in their own life, that the song had great resonance and it moved them or it touched them. I think that's probably the biggest compliment. When you're writing songs, you're trying to get into a space that feels very true. I like the quote, I think Joni Mitchell said it, my songs aren't necessarily factually true all the time, but they're always emotionally true. You want the emotion to be real, and writing about, so you can write about things that you can be somewhat fictional in terms of where the song is on the surface, but I think you have to have had contact with the emotions you're writing about to really make it real. And so if you're doing that, and then and touching people, and they come up to you and they tell you how a certain song has moved them and why. I think that is the biggest compliment.
Is there a greatest well of inspiration for you?
It's interesting. I mean, it's hard to say where inspiration comes from. Sometimes I think the best thing to do is just try to leave the well alone for a while. Probably the most creative time I ever had songwriting, I have a friend who has a 47-foot wooden schooner, beautiful boat, built in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. He bears the same name as me. Gallant is his last name, though I didn't know him until I heard about him being interviewed on a national broadcast on Canadian radio. And he used to sail his boat from Nova Scotia down to Bermuda and then straight down to the Caribbean every winter, and he'd charter it down there. And he had great adventures. I would hear him talk about his adventures sailing in the North Atlantic. And I knew absolutely nothing about sailing. But I went to meet him at a festival because I knew he's also a songwriter. I went to meet him at a festival and agreed to have him take me on as crew. And so here we were, three of us, two guys who knew how to sail and me, sailing out of Mahone Bay in the month of November. Basically ran into a storm immediately after we sailed out, and we were sailing 7 days to Bermuda and then 7 days down to the Caribbean. It was a pretty wild and woolly trip, especially for a total novice sailor like I was. We broke a mast in a storm. We had some pretty crazy adventures. We were at one point surfing down 40-foot walls of water in the middle of the ocean. It was pretty intense. So all of my thoughts and energy were on that journey. But then I spent about 2 months on the boat in total, and I just totally fell in love with it. Never tried to write a thing during that period, but allowed myself to just fill up on some fantastic experiences. And then when I went back home, I couldn't believe it. I was writing like 2 songs a day and wrote a whole album in about a week, which was, quite incredible for me. Never really had that happen again, but it taught me a lesson about just walking away from it once in a while and letting the well fill up again. It's a good lesson, not one that I've adhered to that well, but I try to once in a while.
Is there any ritual that you have before you do a concert performance?
I can't say there's a real ritual. I try to spend a little bit of time alone if I can and just think about what I'd like to do or say during the show. Take the audience somewhere. I love taking my audiences on a journey. I like touching on various emotions during a show. I want to make them laugh, hopefully touch them with something poignant. I have a lot of funny stories that happen during the show, but also, we often touch on a few serious issues as well. So I like to kind of touch on a wide spectrum of emotion in the show, make people feel like they've really been taken on a bit of a trip.
What is the greatest blessing in being Lennie Gallant?
The greatest blessing?
Yeah.
I'd have to say my daughter. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I get a lot of joy from her. It's hard being on the road when you're away, but it's great when I get back and spend time with her. She spends time with her mom, but whenever I'm home, she comes over and spends time with me, and that's probably the greatest blessing for being Lennie Gallant.
For anyone out there that's listening, whether somebody who's listening on the radio or someone listening online, wherever they're listening from, Canada, the U.S., who knows? What would you say to them?
What would I say to them? Well, I hope they're well and happy in their lives. I hope they're feeling productive and they're surrounded by friends and family, or at least people that care very much for them. And I hope they get enjoyment from things in life, especially music, and I hope that music is a part of their lives.
Anyone out there who wants information, it's lenniegallant.com, Gallant. I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate talking to you.
One more question. How do you define Lennie Gallant?
How do I define Lennie Gallant? That's a That's quite a question. I think writing songs is in itself an effort as a possible attempt at definition, I suppose. You're trying to make sense of the world around you. You're trying to, I think what any piece of art or songwriter or artist does is try to slow down the river long enough to take a really good look at it. I think life passes by so fast, and there's so many moments and important moments and that are whipping by you that sometimes we don't really get the full value or get the full impact of what's happening. And so I think when you're writing a song, sometimes you're just taking 3.5 minutes and examining that moment or that point in time a little more carefully. As a songwriter, I think that's what you're attempting to do. But how do I find Lennie Gallant? I'm a Eastern Canadian, Acadian songwriter who is still on a journey of discovery, trying to keep things fresh, trying to stay rooted at the same time.
Well, thank you so much for sharing of yourself. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate the interest, and thank you for playing my music. It means a great deal to me.
Oh, it's an honor. Have a good day, sir.
You too, man.